All right, I'm acutely aware that, first of all, I'm not Jeff McDonald, who was supposed to be here for this. He's in Nashville, I think, at a client meeting. And I'm much less good looking than Jeff, so I'm sort of down from that perspective. And then I'm the final slot between you guys and drinks. So I will try to keep it short, keep it interesting, and go pretty quickly. The subject matter itself, that is not my slide. Oh, am I going? Oh, give it a sec. Subject matter itself is actually quite interesting, so I'll sort of set it up while they're sorting out the slides. Anybody who knows much about BrainJuicer knows what we're all about, and that's applying the latest in the behavioral sciences to marketing, market research. Again, that one is not my slide either. It's throwing me off a little. But what we sort of thought was that typically we apply our System 1 thinking, our behavioral lens, to products, to brands, to different pieces of communication. What we thought might be interesting was to actually apply it to the US presidential election. And I think it's a sort of pet project of ours in general, but I think it also has an interesting point around polling and the fame that it gives our industry. You know, I'm sure you've all been at a party where, you know, people say, what do? You say, I work in market research, and then they'll say, well, sort of like focus groups or like polling, and you sort of give a sort of grudging, you know, nod, yeah, something like that. The only worst thing actually is when someone brings up Super Bowl advertising and tries to sort of educate you, civilian educates you on what makes great advertising. You sort of have to make a swift exit. But I do think that polling sort of gives our industry its name. You know, it's one of the reasons that we have fame as an industry for people outside the industry. Often for the wrong reasons. So it's funny, Rob had exactly the same slide, but polling really was the sort of birthplace of the industry. About 1916, the Literary Digest ran the first national poll. They got it right several times. Then Gallup got it right. He sort of introduced scientific sampling, but even he got it wrong at times, right? So this was the presidential election in 1948, I believe. Gallup predicted that Dewey would win against Truman, and actually the opposite happened, and the newspapers had already run the same headline, this headline, the night before. So they obviously had to retract that. But we really haven't gotten that much better over the years, right? A couple of years ago in the UK, all of the polls, gold standard market research, right? Big scientifically weighted samples, they all way underestimated the majority that the Conservatives actually won 2 years ago. Last year, there was a referendum on Scottish independence. And again, the polls sort of had it neck and neck when in actual fact, you know, the sort of Stay Together campaign easily won, right? Now, there's been a lot of inquiries and a lot of sort of press around that, and all of it focuses very much on the sampling, right? It focuses on not talking to the right people. And that may very well be true, but what we would advocate at BrainJuicer is that there's also a fundamental flaw in the way that a lot of the market research is done and a way that a lot of the questions are asked, right? People think a lot less than we like to think they think, right? 95% of market research is actually premised around the sort of more traditional approach to how people make decisions. It's a persuasion-based approach, right? You ask me a sensible question, you're going to get a sensible answer in response, right? People just don't behave in that way, right? I might tell you what I think you want to hear. I'm a very unreliable witness to my own behavior. I make all of my decisions using my gut, intuitive System 1. So if we as market researchers just go in treating the respondent, treating the consumer, whoever it might be, as a very logical, plausible, sensible person, we're going to get as many false negatives as we are false positives, right? We would argue that that applies in elections, right? As well as applies, you know, if you're assessing products, brands, you know, communications, whatever it might be. And that's the whole basis of behavioral economics and behavioral science as you apply it to marketing, market research. So, a new model. At BrainJuicer, we think that brand growth, and you could treat political candidates as brands, right, in essence, is really down to three very simple factors: fame, feeling, and fluency. Fame is essentially the extent to which any brand or candidate is just immediately top of mind, above all others, under time pressure, It's more likely to be chosen more often than all of the other options available in a world where people don't like to think very much. Feeling is actually the thing that triggers people to make a choice, right? If I feel something, I'm going to do something. So feeling really needs to be front and center of any type of research, including polling, to understand what's actually going to trigger people to make a choice. Fluency is essentially distinct assets, right? It's all of the different ways that brands, products, or political candidates can actually access somebody or something in a world where people don't want to think all that hard. So if we take a quick whirlwind tour and apply that to the political election cycle coming up, this is what we get. Talk about fame first of all. So this data was collected in January before a single ballot in any of the primaries had been cast, right? The dark orange is fame, yellow is feeling, the sort of lighter shade of orange is fluency. The first thing you'll notice, and we're looking at Hillary, Bernie, Trump versus Cruz, right? The fame for Hillary and Trump far, far outstripped their nearest competition. And all of the other candidates, at least on the Republican side, were included in this wave of research. You know, they're the long tail, they're not even close. Cruz was actually in second place. And you can see that the primary, the nomination, was actually secured before a single primary ballot was cast, right? These guys were top of mind. They were immediately mentally available to more people. We come to April. If you think about the cycle, we're through several primaries now, right? At least the field has started to consolidate. Bernie's gone much further than anyone anticipated him going. They've definitely made gains, right, in terms of fame, the sort of successor, the sort of follower, the second place candidate, but they're just not able to catch the winner. Fame has already secured the nomination for Hillary and Trump before all of the detailed policy arguments are made, before all the town halls, before all the campaigning. And just to put that into perspective, this is a distinct asset test, picture attribution. It's collected in April, so you know when we've been through a few candidate primaries. You can see Hillary and Donald well ahead, right? Immediately accessible. Bernie and Ted, not doing too bad, right? They're sort of just behind, but there's a big significant difference there. The context is Donald Trump's hair is as recognizable as both of the second place candidates, right? Fame had won those nominations, the extent to which those candidates were mentally accessible before a single ballot had been cast. It's all about being mentally available. Feeling. So feeling is what makes people choose a particular candidate, a particular brand, a particular product. Lots of different ways to measure feeling that are out there. I don't really want to go into the specifics and the pros and cons of each one. We have our approach at BrainJuice, so it's face trace. But really, you know, the key point would be to place that front and center of all market research. What's going on in the presidential election? You can see the negative, which is up at the top, contempt, disgust, anger, fear towards those candidates is just off the charts, right? To put this in context, and this isn't a celebration of BrainJuice, but we have about 95% happiness among our clients when we survey them. We have about 80% happiness among our employees when we survey them. And a sort of commercial norm for either a concept or an advertisement would be about 45% happiness, depending on the exact type of stimuli, right? I've never seen such negativity, except when we researched online dating in the days before it went mainstream, right? People hate these candidates. And what's really, really interesting, actually, on both sides, if you look at it from a brand point of view and you cut it among brand users, and so in the political context you start to cut it among members of different parties, you would expect the negativity sort of decrease, the positivity to jump. That actually doesn't happen in this context, right? This year is unique in that sense. The neutrality definitely disappears for both candidates, but the negativity, even towards Trump among Republicans or Hillary among Democrats, actually remains at similar levels. It's absolutely incredible. And I think that's where the battleground of the election is really going to be fought, in terms of the feeling towards a particular candidate among members or people who typically lean towards the other party. So feeling triggers people to actually act. Fluency. Now, this is a strictly nonpartisan presentation, and if you set aside any of the context, Donald Trump is actually an absolutely incredible marketer. What he has done in terms of shaping fluency for his campaign is really incredible stuff from a pure marketing perspective. What he's very, very good at in terms of creating distinct assets is amazing. You can see his Make America Great Again slogan immediately associated with Donald Trump. Hillary just simply does not have a slogan. Change that matters goes as much to Bernie Sanders as it does to her. Even Feel the Burn, so Bernie's sort of hashtag, is much more attributable to him than Hillary's slogan is to her. So from a fluency standpoint, she's got big issues, right? Nobody really knows what she's articulating. If you go further, what Trump is very, very, very good at is creating tangible ideas in the minds of people who really don't like to think all that hard, right? Consumers, voters, people, right? We're all mentally lazy in the sense that we don't like to think all that hard. So a border wall, it's tangible, right? Everybody knows what a wall looks like. There's one at the back of this room. We can imagine it, we can touch it, we can almost feel it, right? He's created immediate fluency for his brand, right? Broad strokes. Hillary's association with core issues, much, 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 much lower. Where she does have an advantage, actually, though, is on the voting day, right? When you look at her association with the key elements of being a president, she's much more associated with the Oval Office, with the White House, the presidential seal than Trump. And so on voting day, right, this data at least would indicate that Hillary has a voting day advantage. People are going to get cold feet when they go to the voting booth to vote for Trump, if that's what they're going to do. So, almost at time. Who's the winner based on this data set? Wouldn't be quantitative market research without a one-number summary. At BrainJuicer, we project how a brand's going to perform on a 1 to 5-star scale. It's still equally usable and applicable to political candidates. Based on this data, Trump is marginally ahead, but feeling, if you think about it in terms of projecting forward how a brand's going to grow over time, has Hillary just in front. And this is the April wave of data. And if things continue as they are, her feeling advantage, if you remember, her positive feeling was just marginally ahead of Trump's, actually has her tipping the scales. But it's going to be much, much closer than I think a lot of the polls actually predict. So that's our prediction. We haven't actually been wrong yet. This is data from various waves where people were included. Candidates were still running. And we got it pretty much right for every other candidate. So that's our prediction. We'll go on record predicting that Hillary's going to win. And that's it, really. Just remember, the floating voter isn't pouring down over the party policy document or the manifesto, as we would call it in the UK. We're just looking at broad impressions. And that's really what winning an election and forecasting an election in a system one way is all about. That's it.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Very succinct.
There's one down there.
What's going to happen with the referendum in England? Are you tracking that?
We are actually, and I have not seen that data, so I don't know what our predictive data is saying on that. My personal opinion is that it will go the same way as the Scottish referendum in that it will be close, but in reality, people will get cold feet at the voting booth.
Anything else? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Alex. Very much.